MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 194 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. I'm Pete Strzok. Allison's on a much-deserved break, so for better or worse, you're stuck with me for this whole episode of Cleanup. And we've got a ton to cover today, including Tina Peters, who's going to jail, Trump Bibles and the state of Oklahoma school system, the revolving door of Eric Adams' administration in New York, an evolving counterintelligence disaster in the United States, a Judge McBurney hearing in Georgia, Trump media executives allegedly fleeing the mismanagement of Devin Nunes, and, last but not least, another court loss for Rudy Giuliani. But first, we have new patrons to thank, including Dennis, Detail Bear, Adam Jobbins, Renee Spencer, Scott F., and Anthony Godshaw. Thank all of you so much for your support. Thank you for joining the team. Thank you for giving us the wherewithal to bring you this news every week. And if you want to support us, you can sign up at patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's patreon.com/AISLE45POD. So with that, let's head out to Colorado for the sentencing of Tina Peters. Now, you may remember Mesa County, Colorado clerk Tina Peters, who was previously charged in Colorado State Court for allowing a man to misuse a security card to access the Mesa County election system and for being deceptive about that person's identity, all coming out of false claims surrounding voting machine fraud in the 2020 presidential election. Now, a jury found Peters guilty this last August, and last Thursday, she was sentenced to 9 years behind bars. District Judge Matthew Barrett had some remarkable things to say at her sentencing. I'm going to read excerpts of it because it addresses the heart of what lies at so much of MAGA Nation, who, as it turns out, is not, in fact, an ignored, underprivileged set of voters who somehow found their one and only voice in the form of Donald Trump, but in fact, are rather something quite different. And it's important to hear what Judge Barrett had to say because he really points out and highlights some of the forces that are motivating support for Trump. Now, in his sentencing, he began by addressing the purpose of the sentencing, which is the same and consistent with any sentencing. And I'm quoting from the transcript, which you could find online. I'd encourage you to go listen to it. It's probably 10, 15 minutes in total, whether on X, whether on YouTube. It really, truly is remarkable. And so Judge Barrett begins by saying, quote, "I consider deterrence in sentencing that is both general and specific, that the sentence I impose must deter Ms. Peters from engaging in similar conduct in the future. But it also must deter others generally from engaging in this type of conduct. I consider rehabilitation where appropriate. I consider punishment where appropriate. I must also ensure that the sentences I impose are consistent among offenders similarly situated, but I must also impose a sentence that is designed to meet Ms. Peters' unique needs. Here, the defense has, and Ms. Peters in particular, has remained quite defiant, which is her right, but certainly not helpful for her lot today. And in arguing why I should impose a particular sentence, she tells me about her ailments, her loss, her struggles in life. But in reality, for those of you who may have been here earlier this morning and seeing some of the folks who've occupied that chair before Ms. Peters, there could be not much in the way of a comparison in terms of the type of sympathy one would extend to Ms. Peters. Those folks didn't have 4 lawyers representing them. They didn't have a team of assistants helping them. They're not getting rides in private jets all over the country. You know the people who sit in that chair struggle, generally speaking, immeasurable trauma in life, struggle mightily with alcohol abuse, substance abuse, mental health struggles, family loss. They come from broken homes. The cards they were dealt were never the cards that you were dealt, Ms. Peters. Now, after going through some mitigating factors about Peters' age and limited criminal history, Judge Barrett continued, "Your lies are well documented, and these convictions are serious. I'm convinced you would do it all over again if you could. You're as defiant as a defendant as this court has ever seen. You don't have those histories of drug and alcohol abuse. There's no lifetime of trauma, not even close to the type of mitigating circumstances I would see from many folks who sit in that chair. No, to the contrary, Ms. Peters, you are a privileged person. You are as privileged as they come. And you use that privilege to obtain power, a following, and fame. And to be sure, there's no doubt in my mind that it is exactly what you wanted, and it defies all sense of common sense to believe when you suggested to me a few moments ago that you didn't want this attention. No, you crave it, ma'am, and there is no one in this courtroom who would consider that to be anything other than the absolute truth. But to get to the point of what it is that you did here, it's my impression distinctly that you never took your job of clerking particularly seriously. You didn't complete the certification. One scandal after another followed you in your time as the clerk. And ultimately, it was a belief that the echo chamber in which you live couldn't be wrong, among other things, that led you to do what you did here. This thought process unfortunately seems to consume so many in our country, regardless of race, gender, political affiliation, or the like, that what it is we hear and think can't possibly be wrong. There are many things in my mind that are crystal clear about this case. You are no hero. You abused your position, and you're a charlatan who used and is still using your prior position and office to peddle a snake oil that's been proven to be junk time and time again. In your world, it's all about you. But at bottom, this case was about your corrupt conduct and how no one is above the law. No one in this country has absolute power. Your position as a clerk and recorder, a constitutional position, does not provide you with a means by which to do your own investigation, to not listen to the judiciary, to not listen to the executives higher than you, to not listen to the legislature who sets the law as it may be. This is nonsense. Our system of government can't function when people in government think that somehow, some way, the power they've been given is absolute in all respects, and that's where you fell. You have no respect for the checks and balances of government. You have no respect for this court. You have no respect for law enforcement, and you do not have respect for your fellow colleagues when you were a clerk and recorder who weren't in lockstep in your beliefs. Indeed, just weeks before trial, you were apparently doing what I mentioned earlier. That is, over at the clerk and recorder's office, where you're not supposed to be, violating the protection order by speaking to employees of that entity with your camera crew in tow. You have no qualms with violating the court's orders because you're innocent, because you didn't do anything wrong. You are just doing your job. You have no problem trying to kick an officer. Your explanation about what happened is preposterous. It's on video. You have no problem lying to officers. It's happened multiple times. They're recorded conversations. It's just more lies. No objective person believes them. No, at the end of the day, you cared about the jets, the podcasts, and the people fawning over you. You abdicated your position as a servant to the Constitution, and you chose you over all else. Yes, you are a charlatan, and you cannot help but lie as easy as it is for you to breathe. You betrayed your oath for no one other than you. And with that, Judge Barrett concluded, And this is what makes Ms. Peters such a danger to our community. It's the position she held that has provided her the pulpit from which she can preach these lies, the undermining of our democratic process, the undermining of the belief and confidence in our election systems. It's not about questioning it. No one says you can't question, you can't ask. It's completely different. And if you don't understand the distinction, then there's nothing I can say or do here today that will change your mind. So the damage that is caused and continues to be caused is just as bad, if not worse, than the physical violence that this court sees on an all too regular basis. And it's particularly damaging when those words come from someone who holds a position of influence like you. Every effort to undermine the integrity of our elections and public's trust in our institutions has been made by you. You've done it from that lectern the voting public provided you with. Everything you've done has been done to retain control, influence. The damage is immeasurable. And every time it gets refuted, every time it's shown to be false, just another tale is weaved. And then with that, Judge Barrett sentenced her to 9 years of jail, ordering that she be taken into custody immediately. She didn't go home. She didn't say goodbye to her friends at a party. Sentence and straight to jail. And frankly, I think there's so much in the eloquent sentencing that could be applied, except apparently following the Supreme Court immunity decision, applied to every other public servant wrapped up into the absolute nonsense that is the 2020 election denialism that is lining up to be the 2024 election denialism if Trump loses. But time and time again, the fact of the matter is, much like the person who recently paid about $4,000 to take a hammer to a signed Taylor Swift guitar, people are not destitute. Many of the MAGA world, MAGA nation, they have enough money to, and privilege to engage in this behavior, to be dropping thousands of dollars to, symbolically, take out their aggression on, the guitar of somebody who dared support somebody other than Trump. But I think if we're going to get to the heart of the problem, which Donald Trump is a symptom, not the cause, we need to understand some of these underlying behaviors. And Judge Barrett, I think, eloquently put voice to many of those characteristics that Peters and others embody. And if, you're not enough into the story of politicians using authority for personal gain, let's take a trip down the road to Oklahoma. But before we do that, we need to take a quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including Tracy Stott, Childless Cat Lady, Sean Shaheen, Vicky Kindberg, New Mexican Girl on the East Coast, Karma McBitchslap says Kamala 2024. Thank all of you so very much for your support. Deeply appreciate it, deeply humbled by your support. And with that, as we indicated before we took the break, let's go to Oklahoma. Now, you may be wondering, or maybe not, all those $60 leather-bound Trump Bibles that he was peddling starting a few months ago, where on earth, who on earth might have that much money, notwithstanding, somebody willing to pay $4,000 to beat up Taylor Swift's guitar, just who in MAGA world is willing to pay that much for a Bible? Now, you'll remember in earlier episodes, we talked about Trump's hawking the title, kid you not, God Bless the USA Bibles for $59.99, a product that he launched shortly before Easter with a social media post announcing, quote, Happy Holy Week. Let's make America pray again. As we lead into Good Friday and Easter, I encourage you to get a copy of the God Bless the USA Bible, Trump wrote, and with that, directing his supporters to a website selling the book for nearly $60. Now, the Bible, which bills itself as, quote, the only Bible endorsed by President Trump, the Bible also includes copies of the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Now, nothing after the 10th Amendment, the 11th through the 27th are nowhere to be found, but no reason anybody would in MAGA world want to see or talk about the 13th, 15th, 19th, 22nd Amendments. Those are best, left out. Put those in the book burning pile. Don't need those. It also includes the Declaration of Independence, the Pledge of Allegiance, and of course, would not be complete with those sacred documents and foundational documents without a handwritten chorus of the Lee Greenwood song, God Bless the USA. Now, with Trump pocketing an undisclosed licensing amount from the Bible sales, you might have wondered who actually is buying them. And now we have at least a partial answer from the Oklahoman in an article from Jennifer Palmer, Paul Monies, and Heather Warlick. And they write, Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction Ryan Walters isn't just talking about buying Bibles for schools. Bids open Monday for a contract to supply the Department of Education with 55,000 Bibles. According to the bid documents, vendors must meet certain specifications. Bibles must be the King James Version, must contain the Old and New Testaments, must include copies of the Pledge of Allegiance, Declaration of Independence, U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And finally, must be bound in leather or a leather-like material. A salesperson at Mardell Christian and Education searched, and though they carry 2,900 Bibles, none fit the parameters. Now, mind you, setting aside, this isn't the article, they didn't say they have a total of 2,900 Bibles. They have 2,900 versions of Bibles. None of them, not one of the 2,900, not a one, fit the bid coming from the state of Oklahoma. Now, continuing with the article, but one Bible fits perfectly. Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA Bible, endorsed by former President Donald Trump and commonly referred to as the Trump Bible. They cost $60 each online, with Trump receiving fees for his endorsement. Mardell doesn't carry the God Bless the USA Bible or another Bible that could meet the specifications, the We the People Bible, which was also endorsed by Trump. Now, it sells for $90. Quote, the RFP on its face seems fair, but with additional scrutiny, we can see there are very few Bibles on the market that would meet these criteria, and all of them have been endorsed by former President Donald Trump, says Oklahoma Appleseed Center for Law and Justice Executive Director Colleen McCarty. Now, the article continues. Former Oklahoma Attorney General Drew Edmondson said the request for proposals might violate state law. Quote, it appears to me that this bid is anything but competitive, Edmondson said. It adds to the basic specification other requirements that have nothing to do with the text. The special binding and inclusion of government documents will exclude almost all bidders. If the bid specs exclude most bidders unnecessarily, I would consider that a violation. Now, the article continues to note that this is a wild abuse of the Oklahoma state budget. Separation of church and state concerns aside, much less expensive Bibles are readily available. Paperback versions of the New King James Version are available online for $2.99 each, less than 5% of what the Trump-endorsed Bible would cost. There are many free Bible apps, too. Though Walters has frequently said he wants Bibles in every classroom, he has also clarified publicly that he wants them in classes where the Bible might apply to academic standards, such as history or literature. The request for 55,000 copies doesn't fit either scenario. There are only 43,000 classroom teachers in the state, and many fewer teaching just history or literature. If the Bibles cost $60 each, and the state buys 55,000, that's $3.3 million. Now, listening to this article, you may be asking yourself, just how much has Trump made from peddling these Bibles? Well, we don't completely know, but the article does conclude with this. Financial disclosure forms filed by Trump at the Office of Governmental Ethics shows he does benefit from Greenwood Bible sales through a Trump company, CIC Ventures, LLC. His latest disclosure, obtained by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, shows Trump received $300,000 in royalties from the God Bless the USA Bible. And I cannot, thanks to that reporting from Oklahoma, I would hope Oklahoma politicians, I would hope the good people of Oklahoma would absolutely find a way to cancel this contract. It should be noted, and probably surprising absolutely nobody listening, that Ryan Walters is in fact a diehard supporter of Donald Trump, has any number of great things to say about him, his leadership, and the work Trump is doing to bring Christianity into our schools. But what is particularly obnoxious is setting that aside, there's not even the slightest jump to go from that so-called enthusiasm about bringing Christianity into our classrooms to lining the pockets, literally selling the word of God, using the Bible, using the Holy Scripture to line the pockets of the man running for president of the United States in the Republican Party. Every time I think there is no bottom, whether it's golden shoes, whether it's fake diplomas, whether it is fake steaks, horrible wine, whatever it is, we manage to somehow find a way to debase something further. And frankly, the word of Christ, I can't think of something more perverse than to try and introduce that at a profit into young minds with partial documents that conveniently leave out, critical parts of our Constitution talking about the right to vote for any number of other things that apparently we just turn off. After the 10th Amendment, that's enough. We don't need to pay attention to what happened after that. It's disgusting, and I hope Oklahoma finds a way out of this horrible, horrible potential expenditure of money. Now, we still have lots more to talk about, including another round of departures for Eric Adams' administration in New York City, the appearance of classified information in his criminal trial, and another breaking counterintelligence story from last week. But first, we need to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Let's head up to New York City. But before we do, we have more patrons to thank, including Carl Brunberg, Claudia Burke, Janet Babb, the other Tim, and Jonathan. Thank you so much. Thank you for supporting the program. Thank you for tuning in and supporting us and allowing us to get this out to each and every one of you. And with that, talking to New York City, back in September, you may remember us talking about New York City First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, specifically about an FBI search warrant at the residence of her husband, outgoing schools chancellor David Banks, where the FBI seized electronic devices belonging to both Wright and Banks. Well, turns out Wright may soon resign. And according to New York Post reporting, quote, "It's not an amicable break, with City Hall forcing Wright out of the door, as Governor Kathy Hochul has been pressuring Adams to clean house following his federal indictment and a swirl of investigation around his top officials," sources said. Quote, "She's leaving because she's being shown the door," unquote, one source said. Now, Wright's potential imminent departure comes on the heels of yet another New York City resignation, this time Tim Pearson, who's a close confidant to Mayor Eric Adams. According to reporting from William Rashbaum and Dana Rubenstein at the New York Times, quote, "One of Mayor Eric Adams' closest aides and confidants resigned on Monday, less than a week after the mayor was indicted on corruption charges, and nearly a month after federal agents seized the aide's phones in a separate corruption inquiry, according to a resignation letter his lawyer said had been sent to the mayor. The aide, Timothy Pearson, had a broad portfolio that included dealing with contracts for migrant shelters and focusing on public safety. He is the fifth senior member of the mayor's administration to announce his departure in the past 3 weeks. And now, if you add to that Sheena Wright, now the sixth, but I don't think, A, I don't think we're done. B, I would not be surprised at all to see that these departures of both Pearson and Wright may not be the last chapter, and we may in fact see federal indictments heading their way, in my opinion. And it's important to note, Pearson's recent troubles aren't his first. The New York Times notes, quote, "Retired police department inspector, Mr. Pearson is also a defendant in 4 sexual harassment lawsuits filed by subordinates, and he is the subject of 2 separate inquiries by the New York City Department of Investigation. He was among several senior administration officials whose phones were seized by federal investigators on September 4th. While we're talking about Eric Adams, there is a small but worthwhile note to the ongoing criminal case that Adams is involved with, and that on Friday, prosecutors filed a SIPA notice with the court, which highlights the presence of classified information relevant to the trial. Now, SIPA, the Classified Information Procedures Act, are the rules which govern the use and handling of classified information in federal criminal trials. And they're the same across the board. SIPA, and there's different sections of SIPA which go through how the government and the court and the defendants handle classified information, whether substitutions can be made for classified information to shelter or keep particularly sensitive information from being disclosed, but they're the same. The rules apply across the federal government. So if you have CIPA proceedings in the Southern District of New York, they're going to be the same as CIPA proceedings in the Eastern District of Virginia, or in the Northern District of California, or notably down in the court of Judge Eileen Cannon. And it will be interesting to see that with Eric Adams's CIPA process now underway, to compare and contrast what I suspect will be fairly efficient CIPA process in SDNY, which we can also add, Senator Menendez's trial also included classified information, and CIPA was also involved. But it just goes to highlight the absolute abomination of the trial proceedings that Judge Eileen Cannon allowed down in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. And hopefully, if it returns to her, I don't expect that to change. But if we get a new judge, we might also get something much more in line with the norm of how CIPA evolves. Now, when it comes to Adams, it's not surprising to me. If you read the charging document for Adams, there's a very strong alleged involvement by the government of Turkey and its agents, everything from potentially arranging airfare to getting rapid safety clearances on buildings that were related to the government of Turkey. So it's not surprising anytime you get a case with this much foreign government involvement that there might be classified information. We don't know much, if anything, about that classified information at this point. We don't know if it is evidence the government intends to use. We don't know if it is material that the government is obligated to turn over in discovery. We don't know if it comes from the FBI or from another member of the U.S. intelligence community or for a foreign government. We just don't know anything about it. But again, it's not particularly surprising. But the big takeaway is, as you watch this case unfold, again, another data point in our collective consciousness about how the CIPA process should work, as opposed to the way that it worked in the court of Eileen Cannon. So with that, that's just the notice, and there's clearly going to be much more to come with the trial. Now, as long as we're talking about classified information, I want to take a quick detour, not so much in the cleanup wheelhouse, but certainly along counterintelligence lines that we talk about from time to time. And this is something that came up through some really, really good reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. This is all things that happened after I left the government. But they're reporting on a potentially massive intelligence breach. Now, this is coming from Sarah Krause, Dustin Bowles, Aruna Viswanathan, and Robert McMillan in the Wall Street Journal. Quote, a cyber attack tied to the Chinese government penetrated the networks of a swath of U.S. broadband providers, potentially accessing information from systems the federal government uses for court-authorized network wiretapping requests. For months or longer, the hackers might have held access to network infrastructure used to cooperate with lawful U.S. requests for communications data, writes the Wall Street Journal, continuing, Verizon Communications, AT&T, and Lumen Technologies are among the companies whose networks were breached by the recently discovered intrusion. The widespread compromise is considered a potentially catastrophic security breach and was carried out by a sophisticated Chinese hacking group dubbed Salt Typhoon. It appeared to be geared toward intelligence collection, the people said. Wall Street Journal continues, the surveillance systems believed to be at issue are used to cooperate with requests for domestic information related to criminal and national security investigations. Under federal law, telecommunications and broadband companies must allow authorities to intercept electronic information pursuant to a court order. It couldn't be determined if systems that support foreign intelligence surveillance were also vulnerable in the breach, unquote. Now, I want to unpack that a little bit because if you don't have an intel background, that might sound bad, but bad for reasons that don't make a lot of sense at first. And let's break it down this way. So, say there's a Chinese intelligence officer in the United States assigned to the embassy in Washington, D.C. It's a completely hypothetical example. He works for the Ministry of State Security or the MSS. He is running around Washington, D.C. in the United States collecting intelligence. The FBI is going to be very curious and interested in what he is doing day in and day out, what information he's trying to collect, who he's talking to, who he's trying to recruit. One of the best techniques the FBI has to do that is to get authority to monitor his communications, whether it's his cell phone calls, whether it's his email or his text. they can do that by getting a court order to do so. In the national security context, that's done through what's called the mechanism is FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is the FBI has to go to a judge, present evidence that the person to be targeted is an agent of a foreign power. They go in front of federal judges in something called the FISC, or the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. But all the judges there rotate through. They are sitting district court judges, and the government will lay out, here's this intelligence officer, here's the evidence of what we know that he's doing. Please grant us authority to monitor his phone calls and his emails and his texts or whatever else the case may be. Or give us a search warrant so we can look at all the stored communication that he's left in his Gmail account or his, Yahoo account, whatever it may be. And the court will authorize that. Now, once the court authorizes that, that gives the FBI the authority to go collect it, but the FBI can't do that on its own, right? The FBI is not Verizon. The FBI is not AT&T. They have to go to those companies and say, look, here's a court order which directs you. It's not voluntary. You must give us whatever the order says, anything stored in his Verizon email account and every cell phone conversation he has for this period of time. And then those companies will say, all right, got the order. And, they've got big legal departments. Some of the bigger companies actually have people with security clearances, and this all goes on a very routine basis. But then it's the company that actually, throws the switches and connects the wires, that takes the data that they have and sends it over to the U.S. government. Now, what this article is saying is that it appears that China gained access to those systems within the companies, right? Within Verizon, within AT&T, within Lumen Technologies, potentially others, where they track all of those things and people and accounts that the government has gotten authority to monitor. And if you think about it, that's a huge both intelligence boon for China and nightmare for the United States, because every single person that the FBI is watching that has an account with Verizon or AT&T or Lumen, potentially not just the names, but those accounts, and also potentially the dates of when that surveillance occurred, were possibly there for China. So if China is saying, okay, well, gosh, they were watching this intelligence officer at the embassy in Washington, D.C., and gosh, they started watching him on the 2nd of July, 2023, and they're still watching now. And they're looking at his colleague, and they're looking at this third colleague. And hey, by the way, it doesn't look like they're aware of these fourth and fifth colleagues, but the amount of information that's there. And also, by the way, not just that, but say in the course of watching this Chinese intelligence officer, the FBI sees that he's meeting with, an analyst from the Department of State. And say the investigation shows that the analyst from the Department of State is actually passing sensitive information. So the FBI gets a case up and going on that Department of State analyst and gets a FISA on that Department of State analyst. Well, that information's in there too. And so the Chinese can see not only what Chinese intelligence personnel might be being monitored, but also U.S. personnel or government personnel that might be working with the Chinese. And it's not just China, right? Potentially it's everybody in China working with China, but also in Russia, working with Russia, in Iran, working with Iran, and so on and so on and so on. So depending on how much data is there, it potentially is a massive, massive problem. And it is a problem that the U.S. may never completely understand the scope and breadth. But it's a big deal. It's kind of obscure until you unpack it and think about it. But potentially, when they say it's a potentially devastating intelligence failure, that's absolutely right. I don't know that we'll hear a lot more about it because these things don't tend to get talked about that much. And it angers me a little bit that people were talking to the Wall Street Journal as much as they did, but they did. So there you have it. So we'll get back on track to clean up stuff with updates on court proceedings surrounding the Georgia State Election Board, executives who are fleeing Trump media, and along with it, the alleged mismanagement of Devin Nunes, and finally, a Rudy update, all after this quick break. So stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Our last group of new patrons to thank this week includes Lynn 10, Colleen, William Collins, Daniel Joseph, and Poli-Sci Prof. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your support is amazing. It's critical. And absolutely, we are grateful for your support that allows us to bring this show to you. And so from that, The last part of the show, let's first go down to Georgia and where the seemingly ever-present and level-headed Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney, and remember, last week he also struck down Georgia's 6-week abortion ban back on September 30th, well, he had another hearing, this time on Tuesday, surrounding a new election certification ruling, which is approved by Trump allies, that observers note will introduce chaos into Georgia following Election Day. This is from Devin Cole at CNN. State and national Democrats have sued the GOP-controlled Georgia State Election Board over a pair of rules passed in August that require county election officials to conduct a reasonable inquiry into election results before certifying them and allow them to examine all election-related documentation created during the conduct of elections prior to certification of results. The article continues, during a bench trial in the case on Tuesday, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney said the reasonable inquiry rule on its face is vague and needs clarification. At several other points during the trial, McBurney also raised concerns about the election board changing election rules so close to this year's contest, saying that, quote, new rules seem to pop up every 20 minutes. CNN continues, but as McBurney on Tuesday seemed to agree that clarity needed to be brought to the reasonable inquiry rule passed by the board in August, he threw cold water on Democrats' argument that the examination rule will disrupt the certification process, which must be completed this year by November 12th. Quote, that seems to be a permissive rule, and I struggle to see how that presents uncertainty to anyone because it permits access but doesn't obligate anyone to do anything. It says you may, but not that you must, McBurney said of the examination rule. Now, friend of the program, Anna Bauer, noted both on Twitter and on the Lawfare blog, the new election rules in Georgia will almost certainly not hamstring the certification of the state's electoral votes. And even if certification is delayed, such delays do not open up a legal loophole for Trump to steal the presidency. But, she continues, what they do open is a new avenue for political gamesmanship and yet another way for Trump and his supporters, if he does lose the election, to sow doubt about the legitimate outcome of the vote. Now, at the time of the taping, and we tape on Mondays, McBurney has not yet ruled on the new certification rule, but regardless of what he rules, it is almost certain that the losing side is going to appeal the ruling. So whether we can get that appeal heard and argued and a decision published before the election, I think is highly unlikely. Whether it comes in time from the required certification by November 12th, it'll be tight, but we haven't heard the last word on this yet. And then let's now go down to Florida, where hurricane approaching, and some reporting last week from Robert Federecci, Justin Elliott, and Alex Mirjeski at ProPublica about Donald Trump's media company, Trump Media and Technology Group. Former President Donald Trump's media company has forced out executives in recent days after internal allegations that its CEO, former Representative Devin Nunes, is mismanaging the company, according to interviews and records of communications among former employees. ProPublica continues, quote, the chief operating officer and chief product officer have left the company, along with at least 2 lower-level staffers, according to interviews, social media posts, and communications between former staffers reviewed by ProPublica. The company, which runs the social media platform Truth Social, disclosed the departure of the chief operating officer in a securities filing Thursday afternoon. ProPublica has not seen the whistleblower complaint, but several people with knowledge of the company said the concerns revolve around alleged mismanagement by Nunes. One person said they include allegations of misuse of funds, hiring of foreign contractors, and interfering with product development. Some word of the departures became public earlier this week when former Trump media employee Alex Gleason said in a social media post that, quote, Truth Social in shambles, many more people fired. And anybody surprised, moving away from the reporting, anybody surprised, having watched Devin Nunes's tour of running the House Intelligence Community, should absolutely be not shocked in any way, shape, or form that his ability to translate his mismanagement of an intelligence committee to a mismanagement of a half-baked meme stock social media company yet to turn a profit should surprise no one. But here we are. And then finally in closing, what cleanup episode would be complete without another update on the hapless legal pratfalls of Rudy Giuliani? Let's head back out to the Southwest, to the chambers of the Maricopa County Superior Court, where Judge Bruce Cohen issued a ruling throwing out a claim by Giuliani that grand jurors who indicted Giuliani were chosen by political affiliation. Judge Cohen wrote, Giuliani's, quote, underlying claim that formulates the request is based upon pure speculation and abject conjecture. He claims that there is concern that the grand jurors that served on the grand jury that indicted defendant Giuliani were selected based upon their political party affiliation. Yet he alleges not one scintilla of information that would support this claim, unquote. And frankly, take that last sentence, he alleges not one scintilla of information that would support his claim, and apply it to pretty much each and every statement out of Rudy Giuliani's mouth for the past, 4-6 years. Anyway, all this by way of saying Giuliani, to remind everyone, still facing criminal charges down in Maricopa County, still coming, and whoever gains and wins the presidency this coming November cannot issue a pardon if he is convicted down there. Now, that's it for today. So if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/aisle45pod. Again, that's patreon.com/AISLE45POD. And if you didn't enjoy it, for God's sake, please don't tell Allison. She'll be back next week, much like Richard Nixon, tanned, rested, and ready as we hit the last month of the home stretch towards our presidential election. So everybody go check your voter registration. Make sure you're registered. Tell your neighbors, your friends, your family to register and or check their registration as well. Get on a phone bank, get on a text bank, go out and canvass door to door, write letters, talk with your friends and family, get people registered. This is the most important vote of our lifetime. If everybody gets out and votes, it will be a landslide victory. If people are apathetic or don't know what the big deal is, who knows what's going to happen? And it's too important to leave any of this up to who knows. So get motivated. We're under a month, and we'll see where this goes. Now, I'm Pete Strzok, and I'll see you on next week's episode of Cleanup on Aisle 45.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.